Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So yes, I did watch day two of the trial, and I'll just tell you what I gathered from all of it. This is going to be in a scattered fashion, but then it's really interesting, and it's so good to see how the prosecution and the defense have actually laid out their arguments. I can see where this is going, but you will never tell when it comes to evidence and how people give their evidence. And do not forget that in criminal cases the burden of proof is beyond reasonable doubt, so it's a higher threshold than if it were a civil case and you were dealing with the balance of probabilities. Anyway, today the third witness came on the stand. He was the one who gave evidence yesterday, and he continued with his evidence today. If it were here in the UK, he definitely would not be in contact with anyone between yesterday and today. It just means that he would not discuss this case at all. I do not know if it's the same in the States, but I would think that it's the same. But then he was giving evidence and talking about how the police officer showed no remorse at all. He used the word remorse, and then he used another word, non-responsive. And the defense tried to strike that out, and objections were sustained. He talked about the ambulance arriving. He was asked if he saw Derek, the police officer, take his leg off the deceased George Floyd, and he said no. So what he was saying was that all this while Derek had his leg on George Floyd, even when the ambulance came, his leg was still on George Floyd's neck. And that is very worrying. The defense tried to make him look like a very, angry black man. The defense kept saying, so you were angry, that's why you said this. You called the officers a bomb 13 times. You called them bogus. You swore at them. You said this, you said that. And at this point, you could see that the witness was getting irritated. I don't want to use the word angry because he kept saying, I'm not angry. I wasn't angry. He was saying things like, I stayed professional and, you cannot get me to look angry. I just stayed professional. But I mean, whether he was angry or not is irrelevant, because if I was there, I would be screaming at the top of my lungs. I would literally be shouting, because I can imagine them, watching a man's life ape away. And then the defense is trying to make this gentleman look like, he was angry. Angry or not is irrelevant. And quite interestingly, when the prosecution came back to re-examine him, in the UK we call it re-examination, this witness just basically, when he asked him, so why were you angry, he then carried on to say why he was angry. He didn't say I was angry, but he didn't go against the prosecutor, saying why were you angry. So obviously he was angry, but he just wasn't happy with the fact that the defense was trying to make him look like he was angry, and because of him and the other people who witnessed this, death, making it look like they had distracted the officers from maybe doing their jobs or anything. The witness said that he was there until the stretcher came. The defense was saying that he must have come at a later time than he claimed that he came on the scene. I found that very irrelevant, because you could hear the man on the tape. He was swearing at the police officers. He was trying to get Derek to take his leg off this man who was dying. No one was listening to him. He was coming on and off the curb because the other police officer kept telling him not to come down the curb, So they had a police officer basically pushing people away, and then they had this other police officer who had his leg on this man's neck. At some point the witness started crying, and that was when his recording was played. What happened was, even though he was on the scene with police officers, he felt so terrible that he had to pick up the phone and call the police. He wanted to speak to a senior boss to say, listen, I have just witnessed a murder. when it comes to evidence, the judge is looking at what happened, what could have happened, also what happened afterwards. The fact that he felt the need to call the police and say, listen, you've got police officers here, but I need to let you know what I have just seen. Just made it more obvious that this wasn't just an angry man screaming his head off. This was a man basically saying, what I have seen is not normal. And he said he felt the need to call the police because he felt no human connection with the police that were on site. He was asked about his wrestling career. In fact, the defense had Googled him because he was talking about how you could find out the matches that you have won and the ones that you haven't won on the internet, trying to make it look like, wrestling is a sport. And the witness was saying that wrestling is a way of life. And then he started talking about the different chokes. If you remember yesterday, the witness talked about a chokehold. And so the defense was trying to talk about chokes. They practically were turning this man into a medical doctor. He's not a medical doctor. I mean, the medical doctor has already said what he thinks was, the cause of death. An autopsy was prepared, so I do not know why they took so much time trying to talk to a wrestler who has, yes, good, training, but trying to talk him into chokeholds and all of that. I didn't think that was necessary at all. So the trial ran smoothly yesterday, but it was very different today. There were a series of objections from both sides, and this was a bit frustrating. Lawyers don't really like having to, rephrase their questions and all of that, but they had to because during the testimony of Donald Williams, he had answered, more than he should at some point. And sometimes the defense lawyer just asked questions that he shouldn't have. But then it was the same for the prosecution, because at some point the prosecutor was asking him very direct questions. You're not allowed to ask direct questions. You only ask direct questions if you are cross-examining, but he was practically trying to put into Donald Williams' mouth that, this man, George Floyd, had been murdered. And there had to be frequent breaks from questioning just to discuss what could be asked. So Donald was asked what he had seen, and he said, like I said before, you could see what he was going through, tremendous pain, and you can see it in his face from the grunting. Oh, you can see his eyes slowly, rolling back up in his head, and him having his mouth open, wide open, slowly with drool, slob, and dryness on his mouth. And you can see that he's trying to, gasp for air, and trying to be able to breathe as he's down there and trying to move his face, side to side so he can, I'm believing, I'm assuming, gasps for more air there. I mean, the jury is listening to all of this and they must be thinking this wasn't good at all. I mean, they saw the video, like I said yesterday. The fact that the prosecution put out the video at the beginning of this was not good. However, if you really look at what has happened in the past, there have been cases where, evidence like this has not really secured a conviction. So it's possible that there is no conviction after this. There are past cases where the jurors have been sympathetic towards officers who they think made very split-second decisions when facing danger. So it's not, it's not guaranteed that there is a conviction in this one. But the video is very powerful. And in this day and age, where everyone saw this video even before it was played, I don't know where they got the jury from. Pardon me. So they have had other witnesses give evidence. And in the morning, a very young girl, a teenager, Daniela Fraser, took to the stand and she blamed herself for not intervening. It's really sad because she was the one who took the footage of this very disturbing occurrence. She said in court, "When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad. I look at my brothers. I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they're all black. I have a black father. I have a black brother. I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done, it's what he should have done. Oh, this is so sad and very heartbreaking. Anyway, have you been watching the trial? Let me know what you're thinking. Day two of the trial, and I don't know how this is gonna go, but we keep watching. All right, then, do not forget to subscribe and let me know what you're thinking. Bye for now, and leave a like. Bye.
You gonna kill yourself. I already know it. 2 more years. You gonna shoot yourself. Murderers, bro. Y'all niggas is murderers, bro. Give me up a separation.
Hey, that's
Yeah, man. So I want to see the supervisor. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he wants to speak with the supervisor relating to 320's cause. Couple.
You kill that man in front of the store. The police.
2033, 46, May 25, 2020.
Is that then an accurate recording of the call you made?
That is correct.
And at the beginning, you referred to Officer 987. Where did you get that number from?
Honestly, it just visually popped in my head. Like, I looked at his badge, and that's what I read on his badge.
And so, whose badge, which officer were you referring to?
The officer sitting over there.
Okay. And was that also the officer that had his knee on George Floyd's neck?
That is correct.
For the record, when your previous answer, you were pointing to the defendant, Mr. Chauvin.
That's correct.
And so the purpose in making, what was the purpose in making that 911 call at that time?
I just felt like that was the right thing to do. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to do. But
And-
call.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
But call.
And the response then was to transfer you to a sergeant, correct?
That is correct.
And then at some point the call, it sounds like you're talking to Officer Tao. Do you recall if you were actually talking to Officer Tao at that point?
That is correct.